All right, everyone. Hey, it's Friday, and it's another episode of Q&A with Alan and Marshall. But Alan is out of town. He has some family challenges he's working on with his mom. So Richard Greaves has so graciously agreed to join us. And how are you doing today, Richard?
I'm doing terrific.
Yeah, and so we want to give a shout out to Alan and his family. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. And we will see him next week. So, anyway, how are things in Michigan today?
Today, again, it's another perfect day in Michigan, although it's supposed to rain next week. So I can't wait to get out there and finish mowing the lawn.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have a great show today. Richard and I came up with a slate of discussion topics that I know you guys are going to have a lot of fun with. But to get going here, we want to just remind you that this is a Q&A show, so we really need your engagement. So please ask questions, leave a comment, tell a story, whatever you want to do. Please do that in the chat, and we would really appreciate that. Also, we're always trying to grow our watchers, our viewers. So if you could please share that you're watching, we would really appreciate that. That always helps us out when folks do that. So thanks a lot. And lastly, if you're watching, we would love it if you would just say hello. Where are you watching from? Where's your shop? Where, what city you're in? All that kind of stuff. That's always great. And we've got some people signing in right now. And so let's say hello to them. So Podrick's watching from Cork, Ireland. Good to see you today. Ghost, of course, is here as usual from Uppsala, Sweden.
Starting from the east.
Josh is here from Oklahoma. Chris is here from Saskatchewan. So we have quite the international viewers today. Mm-hmm. Cindy's watching from Texas. Good morning. Peter's here from good old M&R in Chicago. Eric's here from Hotlanta. Good to see you, Eric. Glad you're here. And so that's good. So please let us know that you're watching. That would be really super awesome. Good to see everybody here. So let's go ahead and run the GSG promo, and then we can get to the meat of the show. I think that would be lots of fun. So we really appreciate GSG for sponsoring the show. And here's a little thing just for you.
GSG, the combination of over half a century of knowledge with industry-leading technology and the customer at the center of everything that we do. Graphic Solutions Group is a powerhouse distributor of traditional screen, sign, wide format digital printing, embroidery, and textile decorating. We are committed to our customers, providing support, educational, and consulting services. Your success is our success. We've seen these industries grow and change in our 70 years. One thing never changes: GSG's dedication providing the best products and services available. We've been around, we'll be around, from the highs and the lows, standing right here with you. GSG, the right products, right away.
Awesome. So today, viewers, we are going to have not the David Letterman countdown, but the Richard Greaves countdown. So we're going to do the top four Richard Greaves things that he thinks that you need to know. And I thought it might be fun if you guys put your top four challenges or things that you think either Richard's going to talk about or the things that you guys might be struggling with. what are your top 4 things? Can you put them in the chat? And that might be some just interesting kind of a engagement there, right? So what are your top 4 things? And number 1 is the biggest, so we want to do 4, 3, 2, 1. And so your number 1 is the big daddy, right? So whatever that is. So you're ready to get to the first one?
I'm ready.
All right. Do you remember what it was?
No.
It's our favorite.
Okay.
Standards, processes, right? And I know to me, this was, as we were discussing this earlier, Richard, this is my number 1, but it's number 4 for you. So talk about this and on your list and kind of your viewpoints on it.
So to me, standard operating procedures are fundamental in that in screen printing, every employee that I've ever had, I've never hired an experienced screen printer, screen maker, ink person. Never have I been able to hire somebody that could just do the job. Thus, me being able to document, the documentation has been real important. And so I'm literally teaching all the time. And I think this is going to be happening for every person, whether you're a 3-person shop and it starts at your kitchen table with your neighbor being the first employee, you somehow have to be able to transfer that information. After the 4th or 5th time, it gets a little bit irritating or boring. And so you write it down. Or what I've done on many occasions, I have the person write it down. I learned this from the 1-Minute Manager. In the 1-Minute Manager, one of the initial lessons in that book that I read in the early 1980s was that a supervisor and the employee should write down what they think their jobs are. And you will find what you think the job of that person is. And you're going to find out they never match up. And that's because no one's ever communicated. I'll also say, and I've worked for a lot of places, Delano, Lawson, M&R, what they hired me to do and what I actually did were absolutely 2 completely different things, because things change the minute you get there, just like any military plan. What does Jocko say about that? So Standard operating procedures are very simple. How do you do this particular job? And so there's an order to do it. And I remember when I was first learning how to do screens, did I do this first or that first? I had to learn 2 at one time, and I wrote it down because I always have notebooks around. So I believe it's not that complicated, and everybody has a broadcast network in their hand. Everybody's got a phone, and you don't have to be a professional. Don't worry about making a professional movie, but all you need are pictures to stimulate your memory. That's where a standard operating procedure, yes, it should be written out with references of what you can read in your company's library. You have one, don't you? So what we need are pictures, which are basically part of a checklist. And the checklist is a reminder to go, oh yeah, I do this because. And when you're explaining it to the employees, we do this first because, or we do it in this order because. Why this order, and why do we actually do that anyway? Now I am ready to debate. I'm ready to try and cut something out, because that's even better. If I can reduce a checkpoint. But there really needs to be an establishment of who's in charge, and are we following those procedures? Because when you leave procedure and there are mistakes and you didn't follow the procedure, that's where we have to have a discussion about whether I'm getting what I want from that particular person. And this all comes back then to the job description. Because in the job description, what's the number 1 thing that you're supposed to be doing? And so if you're an ink maker, are all the inks ready for the next day? If you're a screen maker, you can't go home unless the screens are ready for tomorrow morning. I like to say the entire day, but let's be reasonable. Sometimes we're a little hand to mouth. Are their jobs ready for tomorrow? Did you have them for a whole day, but you didn't get around to taping them up because they weren't ready yet? They weren't ready yet. that there's a problem there. There's something we can do. And that's where you ask for help from your leaders. I don't care too much for bosses. Can you help me with this? And I've never known a boss that didn't get ready to say, yes, I'll help you ahead of time. Every time you got into trouble, you went home to your parents and said, gee, now it's after the fact. Can you bail me out? And that's maybe from jail, but maybe just from, I ran out of gas on the expressway.
Right. Yeah, I love this. And a lot of times I think, especially with procedures, it's really good to dig into the why, because people don't connect the dots. You think it's obvious. You think it's obvious about why we do things, but a lot of people just don't know. So it's really important that you're transferring that knowledge to them and articulating the why this is important. Why is screen tension important? Or we coat the screen a certain way, or we use tools, or whatever it is, right? Why is it important to be proactive? Why is it important to have all the screens burned? In fact, I like to have all the screens burned one business day before production needs them, not yesterday, but the day before, because what I want to do is around noon, I want to start staging for tomorrow, and all of those screens need to be ready. So that's why it needs to be done two business days before you're doing production, which puts further pressure on the art department and sales and everything to get that job approved so you can hit the internal deadlines that you have in production. And a lot of times, of course, as we know, we dogpile on production to get things out. It's just, we'll just shove it over there, and now they have to figure it out. The processes have to all work in a relationship with other departments in order to work properly sometimes. And that why do we need it is such an important facet of that. And everybody has to be in alignment for it to work. Don't you think?
Definitely. And the one thing that stitches all this together is measuring. So we've got 4 subjects that we came up with, but you actually can teach people when you can show them that when I measured it, it was too low or too high or out of a standard. I went to give blood again, and I was rejected because of my hemoglobin was too low.
Yeah.
Now I'm an expert on iron supplements.
Yeah. So it's good to have standards, because this allows everybody to be accountable. You know what to do next. You mentioned Jocko, who's one of my favorite authors. You have yours, I have mine. And his phrase is discipline equals freedom, right? Discipline equals freedom. So we're supposed to do something a certain way. And if we always do it a certain way, it's just so much easier because you know what to expect, right? So we've got some great folks here who've joined us. So let's make sure we give a shout out. So Keith's here. Good morning, Keith. Mark's here. Good morning. David's here. Good morning. Scrimshaw Screenprint.
I hope you're doing well.
Good morning to see you. Mark says company library, all department procedures and materials needed. This could be on your server. This could be a YouTube. This could be a Drive or a Dropbox folder. I would have this organized by department or by task or something, and that way it's easy to find, and you just give people access, right? Mark says great points. Bruce says greetings from Tamarindo, Costa Rica. Hey, it's the complete international show today. That's just great. Frank's here from SNS. Good morning. Good to see Mr. Greaves on here. Thanks. Gosta says, even if you're alone in the company, the job description, the list, and the workflow are your security when things get stressful or something breaks. Exactly. How are you supposed to do it? So if you have that written down, if there is a checklist, if there's, this is the order that we're supposed to do things in, it just makes things so much easier when you go by the plan. And of course, when you do things properly, right, it makes things easier. But here's the kicker. when something goes wrong, and both you and I, Richard, have done a lot of diagnosing over the years, right? Something's wrong, and usually it's because somebody skipped step 4 or whatever, right? And that's the reason we're having this issue, right? And talk about that a little bit, because I know that you're keen on that.
If you skip a step, there's undoubtedly a reason why there is a step there. Again, I talked about this a little bit. I touched on it. The idea that I would love to cut a step out because I'm trying to lean everything down. I'm trying to do everything as simply and as structurally simple as possible. So if there's a shorter or a quicker way to do it, I'm always interested in improving that. And so I can throw out my lean philosophy, and that would be that it's on page 77 of 2-second lean. How long did it take? It took 16 minutes to get to my reference to 2-second lean in. And that is that it is our job to reduce the time it does production, to increase productivity. That's our real job. That's what everybody's job is in the entire factory, not to get the schedule out.
Yeah.
The schedule will take care of itself if your systems are working.
Yeah, I wrote about this next thing I'm fixing to say a couple months ago, which is, we always talk about we need to follow the process, or there's a mindset, we've always done it this way. And I can tell you that, for a lot of reasons, we want to follow the process, but sometimes there's a new way. There's a new gizmo. There's a new consumable. There are new fabrics that have come out. There are new inks or new printers or new anything, right? That makes the old way wrong or need to be tweaked or whatever, right? And so we need to constantly be looking at our process to make sure they're still relevant, right? And I think that's really important, especially if you're in leadership. How are we doing it, and is there a better way? Don't get into the deal where we can't change. I think we need to be somewhat flexible in this industry because we have so many new things that are happening every single day and every single month. And you go to a trade show and there's a new whatchamacallit that just came out, and this is going to replace the old way, right? And if you're not constantly learning and adapting to your processes, your competitors are, okay? They're going to quickly outpace you if you're still stuck in the mud, right? So maybe give us an example, Richard, of something that, came out and replaced the old way, and then now it's such a better way of thinking about it. Do you have an example for that?
What comes to my mind that has never taken seed with the world is direct film, capillary film, for making screens. To me, it's the unwritten or the unwritten secret, or the open secret, that people see direct emulsion, and I just see something that's inferior to capillary film, direct film. A direct film is perfect. I can teach Jennifer, 6 years old, how to make a screen that is better than what Joe Ulano could code if he made screens. If he was making a screen and he had an entire week, he couldn't build as good a screen as little Jennifer can do in 20 minutes. It's dry when it goes on. All you do is wet it, and when the surface water dries, it's perfect. Yes, it costs more money for the product, but it removes 10 steps, especially the drying steps. So the unappreciated, most important part of the stencil community would be direct film, capillary film.
So why don't more people use that?
Because it costs too much money. So if it costs double, it doesn't really matter, because you can make screens that are better. And so, why do people buy a Greaves and Hart suit from Savile Row that costs $7,000? Because once you've ever put on a suit like that, you understand, if you can afford it, but it's the quality.
I know all about that. I've got 4. No, just kidding. I don't. So
it isn't like it's that much money.
If you see me in a coat and tie, somebody died.
I haven't worn a tie for 15 years. So
basically, if you see me in pants that go below my knees, that's a shocker, right? I wear shorts.
Let's check those socks
every day. So I think the thing that everybody gets hung up on sometimes is how we're doing and what we're doing, and as you and I both know, the best way to build your business is to reduce variables. And I think the idea of using capillary film is a very interesting one, because if you reduce the whole process of coding and all that stuff to just one step, and you know what the result is going to be and how it's going to work, that is a very interesting idea. Let me ask you this: are there any shops that do that like all the time, just using that? Do you know of any?
The only one is the last shop that I actually ran as a supervisor of a shop, and that was Coastal Printworks in North Hollywood, California. And they wanted to specialize in process work. And they were doing that sort of work, reproducing art from museums, etc., stuff like that. And fine line printing was everything that we did. We had a hand in glove relationship with Jeff Campos, who did all of our separations. And it was Jeff Campos who charged 3 times as much money than the $175 that they were paying to a local lithography guy that was doing a horrible job. I sent one job for In-N-Out Burger to Jeff Campos on my own nickel. And they set it up on a direct screen that I produced. We did it on capillary film, and we used a Jeff Campos, and we set up one time with their screens and one time with my screens. And they set it up, they put it in, they printed it, and it was perfect from the very first print. And that was all it took. And
so what micron cap film is that?
It would have been something very fine in the 15s or 20s.
Mm-hmm.
The thinnest type, because it's full color process on 300 mesh.
Right. Great.
And it's smooth as a piece of vinyl. Smooth on the bottom. Those dots look like hockey pucks when they landed. So yeah, you can do thick film if you want, but that's Harvey.
Hey, so we got some comments that we can get to. So Alan's here watching, which is probably a weird experience for you, Alan.
Alan who?
Alan, yeah. Alan who, that if you just move his letters around, he is Alan who, isn't he? So thank you, Richard. Hey, all our love's going to you, buddy. So Ray says, greetings, Screenlings and Dr. Greaves. Good to see you here. I got the inside and read a book, Moving Past Disaster. Hey, thanks, Gosta, for my book. Appreciate that. You can buy that book on my website, by the way. The biggest problem with industrial screen printing is writing exact product names into ISO processes. There you go. Film is perfect depending on what you are printing. Okay, good comment there. Alan says cap film was...
Yes, but that's an open-ended comment that doesn't have a point to it. So if you're going to criticize me, Jesse, come closer. I like to work with my hands. No, I understand what you're saying, Jesse, but at least put something in for the people that don't understand your exact comment.
Yeah.
So we'll get the usual paragraph, and then I will fill up with my 5 paragraphs.
So Alan says cap film was not anymore. I think he meant expensive. Check out Yolano Easy Film. Dennis Tan, who was just hosting
I happen to know a guy who worked on Easy Film and the orange products.
Yeah.
When I worked at Yolano.
Yeah, good. Dennis Tan at Ampersand uses all cap film. There you go. Very weird.
That Dennis.
Sean's watching. He's on vacation and tuning in. I can't believe it.
We love you, Sean.
In Owl's Head, Maine, wherever that is. So good job. Thank you. And as very word. Okay, I'm sure it is. I know when I've done that before, it's just like, what's going on? The kids have my toys, and I'm not playing with them. What's up? And then, of course, Ray says, no criticism at all. For instance, cap film cannot produce an exact EOM thickness on an every time basis, but I can match cap film RZ with an exact to the micron thickness, but it is more expensive in time than cap film.
Yes, that's correct, because it comes like golf clubs in fixed sizes. So if you need something specific, an EOM, if you need a ink deposit like 72 microns that I use for printing conductive, screen printing conductive elements, printing circuit boards and things, that yes, that you have to build that up with direct emulsion, not direct film.
Okay, great. So let's flip to number 3. Do you remember what number 3 was?
No.
The 3 kings of screen. The 3 kings. So we had a lot of discussion before the show started about screen prep, and instead of having a top 10, we narrowed it down to lumping a couple of ideas. Yeah, a couple of ideas into one. So we called it the 3 kings of screen prep. So, Richard, what are the 3 kings we should be really focused on?
So an overall idea, an overall principle would be pre-registration, pre-registering your screens. With the advent of computers, this is not so abstract as it was when there were no computers. You kids, I'm waving my cane. You kids, and your newfangled computers. I embraced computers immeasurably when they came out. So that starts it. Then moving to something like CTS or laser printing your stencils, you've got to have a template. You've got to have pre-registration that way. And with the adoption for the textile industry of the M&R Trilock, when Rich Hoffman and I introduced the Trilock at the Charlotte Printwear Show, it was as part of the speed test that M&R were doing to how many shirts can we print in an hour, how fast can we set up, and that sort of thing. And it was a basic setup that I'd been using since the early 1980s, because when I came to screen printing, and we're lining it up like this every time, and I built pins into my Cameo multi-printer, 1979, 1980, so that you just push the screen in, push to the left, it was set. To me, pre-registration was elemental. And I gave, Jeffrey Gittimer gave, Richard, send that to Hank Bubbly. Send that system you've got to Hank Bubbly. Okay. And what do I now know? It turned out to be, on-target registration system from Advance. And that turned into the M&R Trilock. But I digress as usual. So pre-registration, if you're not doing it, you're not setting up in 3 minutes per color, which is what an average standard for the international industry would be for pre-registered using a template. Otherwise, it's 5 minutes per color. So are you measuring? Do you know how many minutes per color it takes for you to set up? If it's more than 5 minutes per color, you need help, because you're just losing money like mad. 2 minutes of printing, I don't want to think about how much that costs. But at $300 an hour for an automatic press, quick, somebody help me with the math. I'm thinking
on an annual basis, it's insane.
Yeah. So I know a podcast you could download that was just yesterday.
Well, I recorded it yesterday. I haven't uploaded it on YouTube yet. We're going to do a little editing, and I'll get it up. So I had it. Thank you for the shout out. I didn't
really shout it out, but you gave a great podcast yesterday, going over scheduling and press setup. So moving on quickly. So then you got underexposure. Now I've often yelled at the screen, yelled at people. There is no real thing such as overexposure, because when the stencil is all used up, like popcorn that you put in the microwave, at a certain point, you could do it. You could expose it to more infrared energy for another hour if you wanted. But if they're all popped, nothing more is going to happen. All you're doing is wasting energy. So overexposure is really undercutting, because the light comes in at an angle, and light scatter because the threads of the mesh are reflecting or carrying light along and then bouncing it around a little bit. And so the light's a little bit out of control. These things are easy to deal with because they happen to everybody. And if you don't compensate for them, where you tell it to go is never, 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 never where it actually happens. You have to compensate. It always curves, always curves. So real exposure is using up all the sensitizer so that the stencil is durable. But people are fighting undercutting by saying, well, I won't expose for as long. That's right. And your stencil won't be completely cross-linked. And that means that when you try and remove it and you put the stencil remover in there, the stencil remover goes in and he sees all that uncured emulsion, all that uncured sensitizer and things like that, and it freezes them up because it's just a natural effect of what stencil remover does. If you're having a hard time reclaiming, it's because your stencils weren't completely cross-linked. Easy way to do that is with a $10, $15 tool, the 21-step grayscale, and exposing for a solid step 6 for CTS or a solid step 7. And you can trust this. You can trust it. It's a way to measure. Measure. Last but not least, mesh tension. If you move the skin on the back of your hand, that's what's happening. From Don Newman, I gave it to Alan Howe. He gives us all credit, as we should. All should go to Don Newman. And that is that if the mesh moves while you're dragging it along, it will blur and smear. So registration is always going to be difficult. It's also, if you're trying to set up a 5-color job and each and every screen is a different tension, you'll get each and every screen will give you a different response, and it will never be in register. If they're all the same, which is very difficult to do with static frames, and it takes more work to retension and have stable screens. Some of us are willing to do that because it's the way we live. Some of us not. Those are my top 3. Mesh tension, proper exposure, and pre-registration.
I love it. I love it. And it's all about, really, if you think about it, this also is our SOPs, right? It all relates, right? So it's about...
It's also stuff that the screen room does that they send out to the press and say, can't you fix it on press? Yes, there's some very talented people that can fix the crap that comes out of the screen room. But if the screens are perfect, the job goes in, you put the ink in the screen, and all they have to do is run the press, not try and fix your sloppy work.
Have you ever wondered why some shops put the worst employee in the screen room?
Always. To me, it's the most important spot. It should be the cleanest room in the building. What? The cleanest room in the building.
Yep. Yeah, we're all on the same page. So some comments.
Do these people that are watching, do they know that we can see their screen room by looking into the camera? John Walker, I'm looking at your screen room right now.
John Walker says, have you seen The Boys? Not sure what that means, but...
So is that The Boys on TV? The what are they? They're not vampires, superhero guys?
I don't know.
I
haven't really seen that show. So Scrimshaw says, we use the Alano Easy Cap film here too. Perfectly coated screens without using a machine, and we can coat immediately after reclaim, which saves time. Love that.
2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. Pretty soon it.
Andy's here. Good morning, Andy. Good to see
Andy,
you.
you were supposed to call me last week.
You didn't break the broadcast. Charles, good morning. Good to see you, Charles.
Charles, I gave Charles homework, 10 steps of homework earlier this week. He called up and he made a mistake of asking me what he should do.
Charles, did you do your homework? Or did your dog eat?
He's busy. He got a regular job.
Ray says, and the final word in all these problems is measure. Please buy tools.
Yep.
I think he's clairvoyant. Ghosta says, how do you do that now when there's no coins anymore to bounce on the screen? Josh says, more important than my press operator here. Charles is working on it. Hey, Beppy's here. Just
Beppy!
to say hello to my best friends. Good to see you, Beppy. Appreciate you. Hey, are you going to be in Las Vegas for Printing United? Just curious.
I will.
I will too. Can't wait. All right. So let's, we've got a little shout out for GSG that we want to do. So we want to share, get rid of this. We want to share their screen. We're talking about screens. So they have a Get Cash for Your Frames program. And I've been to their screen reclaim, retention building. It's amazing. They have this huge unit where you put the frames in, and it uses, I don't even know what the water pressure is in this thing, but it completely just blasts the frames to complete shiny new awesomeness. And you can send your frames in, and they can save up to 30% on new, 15% off if you drop them off. They also have premium frames. If you want to buy frames, there's a QR code. See how close I can scan that QR code in here. Here's my learn how to use my system challenge. So scan that QR code and get some frames reclaimed, remeshed for you. You know you got a giant pile of them on a skid. Let GSG help you out. And you, of course, can go to their website, which is gogsg.com. And you can see this is from the Pulse magazine for this season, and they'll help you out. So, all right. You ready for number 2?
Is that all branches or just DFW?
I don't know.
My branch is the Cincinnati branch.
Mark, are you still on here? Can you find out if that's all branches, or are you shipping everything to Dallas? So let us know. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to mislead people. So, Ray says, how many newtons do coins weigh where you are? That's funny. All right. So do you remember what number 2 was?
It's one of the last 2.
Yeah, so, good thinking. It is.
So I'm guessing it's. Oh, that's measuring. Okay, that wasn't what I. Okay. Yeah.
Professionals use professional tools, and which is something that was just alluded to just 2 seconds ago.
I thought that was going to be a thread. I thought number 2 was going to be something different, but I love this one anyway. So at the bottom of my emails for almost as long as I've been doing emails is, how are you measuring? Because in answering questions over the telephone, I ask a probing question, I ask a diagnostic question, and then almost always the third question is, how are you measuring that? And I know what the answer is because I can tell from the questions they've asked, they're not measuring. And it all comes into, you can judge that if you measure it. And I can give people an example of a way to measure something or to photograph something or to do something without expensive tools. They just won't get as good a measurement, but there's still ways to do a comparison The basis of all quality control is comparison.
And you're comparing to the standard, which was 0.4. So you're measuring screen tension, or you're measuring emulsion, or you're looking at your halftone dots. You're looking at all types of different things, right? And the step wedge test, whatever. We're using professional tools. Trilock, is a professional tool, right? And it allows us to do things better because we can train people. We can be consistent with it. We can apply it to the challenge, to the problem. We can solve things. And a Pantone book is a professional tool. But if you want to go to the 7th degree ninja level, you have a color spectrometer to measure to see if you're against the standard, right? So there's a lot of ways that we can do things. And I think a lot of times in this industry, we're not using professional tools because we don't want to spend, several $100s on a donut probe. We want to trust that our $50 heat temp gun's going to work.
So the one thing that you can't really replace with amateur stuff is a tension meter. And even though I have stretch devices tattooed on me somewhere,
you got the tramp stamp?
This is the tension meter I inherited from Joe Clark.
Yeah, great.
When Joe died, I got his tension meter.
Wow.
You can't measure a screen without a tension meter. So it's the one thing you got to pony up the $500 for, and do the right thing. And that way you'll be able to measure the tension at the beginning and the end of a run, and you'll know whether or not the mesh elongated and thus lost tension.
Mm-hmm. So for those that are watching, right, that maybe aren't measuring their tension, give us a little primer on that. So I like to have my floor tension, be at least 18 for a one color and over 20 for multicolor. That's using static frames. If you're using retentionable frames, it's probably way more than that. Well, so what are your opinions on that, Richard?
Well, real stability starts at around 14 newtons. 14 newtons is around 100 pounds of force for each lineal foot. So if you have a 3-foot frame, that would be like the equivalent of a 300-pound person or 150-pound person on each side pulling on the mesh. So 300 pounds of force on the mesh. And that's when the movement of the mesh stops under typical friction from the blade. But a lot of what screen mesh needs to do is pull itself out of the ink film immediately after the blade has passed over the image. And so I don't want any delay. When the blade is touching and moving across, the mesh should pull itself out immediately. This allows you to lower your off contact distance. That way you're not stretching the image out. Remember the picture of Meryl Streep Scavullo took? So the idea that the mesh is then stable and will respond, bouncing up and down, but also not moving side by side, which creates blurs, because if it's still in the image and you've pulled it with your blade, like I showed with my hand, that when you pull it, it's literally like pulling a bow and arrow. You're pulling it, and then when the squeegee lifts up, you lift up and bing, it smears back because it's still in contact with the ink film. Look, room service.
That's great.
Thank you, Gina. Oh, she brought me another book. Good. Book came.
Thank you, Gina. So, and that's great. And also, if you have higher tension, your squeegee can move faster. There's a lot of reasons why to use a higher tension screen. Control, all that type of stuff.
You mentioned this yesterday, and I think that it's something that even I didn't mention it just now. That the idea that you would print something slower, because ink companies would say when they had inks that were not performing or didn't have a good thixotropic index, that when you move it, it would drop in viscosity. That's what makes it a screen printing ink. The idea that I would ever slow my blade down, it just goes against my brain. No, that's fundamentally.
You've seen people do this.
Oh yeah, I had ink people. Their names shall remain. Oh no, just slow down, because I'm calling up and saying, "What's happening with this cyan ink?" Oh well, we do. Mumble, mumble, mumble. I moved to a different ink, because if the ink does not drop in viscosity, why would it flow through the dots? If I have to smash it through the dots, then I've lost all my real control. Bending the blade, using too much pressure. Probably don't have a roll of tape here, but a roll of tape with a hockey puck has been a standard rule of mine to show people that the blade, squeegee blade, never touches the shirt. There's always the barrier of the stencil and mesh in between. You can press as hard as you want, but you will never, ever force the ink out of the mesh, because you cannot make. I used to at trade shows. I used to take my watch off and put it in a roll of tape, and then say, "Okay, stomp on this and make the watch come out of the roll of tape." But little Jennifer, 3 years old, can lift the roll of tape up with 2 fingers, and that's what screen printing really is: the release of the stencil from the ink film without any force at all. The force of the mesh, not you lifting up like you're in your old garage shop with the white tar ink that so many companies used to sell.
Right. So, got some great comments here. So Mark says, by the way, for the screen, screen reclaim, all branches screens come out of our Dallas screen department. You can get your screens remeshed from all GSG branches, so that's great. Gosta wants to know what's your take on the Pantone color book life. So Pantone will tell you you're supposed to place those every year. By the way, the Pantone colors, the chips that are in the Pantone book, they have variations also. By the way, they're not perfect like you think they are. Lots of discussion about that all over the internet, by the way, if you want to go look that up. And especially Rick Roth did a whole thing on a particular gray. I forget what the Pantone color was, but it was kind of a warmer gray, and to some people it was gray, other people it looked pink, and it was a giant issue, right? So to me, a Pantone book's good for about 2 years, and then you want to get a new one. But it really depends on how nasty it gets. I've been to some shops. It's like you're trusting your color matching to that, right? But ideally you want to keep it in its little box, so it doesn't get any UV exposure, and you keep it clean and neat and ready to use. So, to me, Pantone books are a tool, and if you've got any issues with them, you need to replace them. So,
the great thing about the new Pantone books is that they also address metamerism. The back pages have testing for what light source you are using. So daylight and fluorescent light and LED light, they all have different output spectrums.
That's good.
And your colors will look different. So I learned that the hard way. I mixed up a beautiful brown for Summerfest. You mentioned Summerfest a couple of shows ago, that you printed for Summerfest also. And so I created the perfect brown by using all sorts of inks, blue, greens, reds, and the iridescent color from the trout job. And it was perfect in the shop. But we looked at the first one and then carried it out to the pickup truck, and the image hit the sunlight, and the iridescent pigments from the trout job popped up in the sunlight. These are flags that are now going to be put on Wisconsin Avenue in downtown Milwaukee. Had to print the entire job over.
Because they came out green, right? Weren't it green?
Because they weren't brown outside. My biggest mistake I've ever made in my career. All the flags had to be remade. Flags, not t-shirts, flags. More gold fabric. You can see I'm excited just remembering it.
Well, that was a good tuition.
I want to finish off with one thing and then go to number one, because we're running out of near the end of time, although we can go over. And that is, I want everybody to try and print with a putty knife. Take a left front chest job and just print it with a putty knife. It's an excellent example of a perfect way to print, because the blade really doesn't flex. Once you press down, you know that you're down, and bending the blade really doesn't happen. It's a super stiff blade, and you're going to find it prints wonderfully.
Love that. Love that. Let's share some comments real quick. Hurley says, just got a tension meter. By the time the brokerage was covered, it was just under $100 Canadian dollars. Expensive, yes, but knowing all my screen tensions is priceless. Mark says, tools pay for themselves by reducing time wasted by trying to figure out what is wrong. Exactly. Ray says, for those coating with direct emulsion by formula like a 2 and a 3 coat, uniform coating even with an auto coater varies by about 3 microns between 18 and 25 newtons per centimeter. Tension changes coating disposition.
And the amount of liquid emulsion in the trough, if you don't fill it up between each coating, if you're going for that 3 micron sort of a thing, that the 1 ounce of emulsion for screen number 1, and then you take another ounce of emulsion out for screen number 2. By the time you've gone to 4 screens, there's less emulsion, less hydraulic pressure, fluid pressure on the mesh, and that's how you get different stencils, even though you're using an automatic coater. You get a refill to a line if you're going for that kind of accuracy.
Yeah, good. He also says emulsion is also thixotropic. Tension equals pressure against the trough, which is what you were just saying. Frank says, when should new smaller shops move to high tension screens?
Yesterday.
Andy says, my last...
Let me think about that for a second.
Yeah. His latest is a thickness gauge, is fascinating and fun. And I love all the stuff that he's doing up there in Canada. In commercial printing, reread about 10 key Pantone colors in new books with Spectro and store the data. Reread them at 6 months and replace when they change by more than 2 delta E, about 2 years when perfectly stored. This is why you need a color spectrometer if you're going to have that level of accuracy. And then how many people do you think are going to pop their screens by using the putty knife?
I think it's an important lesson for them to learn.
Yeah.
Everybody has a file or a piece of concrete. So all you do is you rub it on a piece of fine concrete in the driveway, curving, and you'll round it. If you can do this, it should be safe.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here's our last topic. This is Richard's number one. Before I show it, type in right now and let's see, all the viewers, if you can guess what Richard's number one thing is that shops should use. What is it? Type it in real quick. Hurry. All right, I'm going to show it. Downtime / wasting time. All right, Richard, go.
Wasted time is worse than wasted money. Over calculating, worrying too much, but mostly the lean principle of attacking waste. What we taught the Japanese in the 30s and 40s, and what they then brought to the United States, they're teaching us our own principles that Deming and Duran took to Japan after the war. So anything that is waste, identifying waste, and there, the place to learn is in the free book, 2 Second Lean. Go to Paul Akers, PaulAkers.net. Download audio copies. The audio copy is better. It has more things in it than the paper copy.
Oh, here he goes. There you go.
And immediately then turn to page 77 and read, your job is not to produce, but to improve the process of how we produce. And that is what everybody needs to be thinking about. So the time, I'm designing a shop right now and reducing the space between the imaging unit and where it's going to be developed. How can I get these two pieces of equipment so that they're only one step away instead of two steps away? Because if they're going to do 100, 150 screens a day, that's a step and a step back. So every place that you can identify and remove waste, that's the place to go.
Yep. Muda.
Muda, Japanese word.
So I love this. And there's a phrase that I actually learned from Richard a long time ago, which is downtime is a cancer. You need to cut it out and completely remove it. And so downtime doesn't have to be in production. It could be in any department in your company. It's when we're not producing things. And I think a lot of times this is invisible. And Richard, why is it invisible?
It's invisible because people are casual about it, because they're not measuring it, because they're not worried about it, because they're not worried about building the company up. The entire company gets stronger or better. And if you're doing the job, if you can find a way to make your job easier, yet produce more, you're happier. I've never known an operator of an automatic printing press that liked going slow. If they could go fast, like anybody with a brand new car, driving slow is not the fun part. It's the going fast that is the fun part. It's the showing that you're good at your job. You need to be kind of a show off to be any sort of a star in any world. And to be a star in the printing world, you need to be, efficient. And it's either something you have or you don't. You're never going to be successful in any trade, in any part of your life, if you're not continuously improving. Mm-hmm. Whether it's your marriage, whether it's your car, everything goes old, everything changes. And so adopting change, constantly trying to continuously improve, be a consistent learner, a lifelong learner, and a consistent improver.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the webinar that I had yesterday, one of the things I showed was how a shop that was printing at 6.55 shirts a minute, by increasing their output by a half a second, so 7 shirts a minute, was able to get 2 more orders out a day. And we had graphs and math and all that, and we showed that, right? And so it was like
perfectly documented how to measure and get to the bottom of your yield for the end of the day. That was very, very good.
Yeah. And so it's one of these things, but if you're not measuring the stuff, if you're not looking at it, if you're not challenging your own norms and working on getting better, you're basically walking around a giant pile of money every day that nobody is picking up. And that's what downtime is all about, is really about picking up that money that's available to you because you're actively always working on it. And it isn't change one thing and the whole heavens open up, right? It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's these little bitty little things. It's these habits that you have that stack up, that add up to that. And you have to constantly be aware. And by really just examining what you're doing, by keeping your eyes open, by observing, and by challenging, why do we do it this way, right? This is how you learn and grow. And I would challenge anybody to walk out on your shop floor and just stand there for 10 minutes and watch people work. And what I'll tell you is there's probably some things that you're not going to like to see, but it's happening every day. And what is the annual cost of that? And you should be looking at this. So
it's employees, their work that generates the motion of your company. That yes, there's always going to be a captain, but the real work is done by a team of trained people. So training is what kills downtime. The cancer of American business is downtime, and training kills that.
Right. So here are the predictions. Charles says lean. Yep, he won. Bruce says tension. We talked about that. Evan says donut probe. All these are great answers. Ray says awesome show. Thank you, Ray. Mark says the most dangerous kind of waste is the waste we do not recognize. Exactly. We don't know what we don't know. And Ray says, don't be afraid to ask for help in this process. It's very hard for operators, owners, and managers to see waste. They are too close to the process. That's what consultants like Richard are great at, and Marshall and me, being, Ray. Thanks. Appreciate it. Great show, guys. Always appreciate to hear what you have to say, Richard. Thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. Appreciate it. And we're about out of time. So, Richard, thank you for filling in for Alan. It's always a pleasure to have you share your knowledge with everyone. And
thanks for asking.
Yeah. So you got plans this weekend? What are you doing?
I need to finish the final drawings for the screen room that I'm designing.
Oh, great. It's like a floor layout blueprint thing?
Yes. So I need to be able to give it to the architects so we can go to their drawing. Their drawing doesn't matter to me at all. So I tell them what to put in, and they draw it.
Good. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again. And thanks to everyone who's watching, either live or the recorded version. And also thank you if you're listening on our podcast, which is also available wherever podcasts you happen to listen. So we have more and more people listening. So I just want to give a shout out to that. So, all right. Hey, with that, we'll see you guys next week. And Alan will be back, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Bye-bye.